Hello, and once again, we're asking questions. We're actually raising questions. That's the real name of the show. You can tell I'm in isolation. I don't even know the name of the show anymore. This is having a lot of effects on a lot of people, and that's one of the discussions. That's one of the points I'd like to get into this time. And that and the question of money and a question of what are the ultimate meanings, perhaps, of this isolation period that we're going through, and also a little bit about baseball and how that relates to the isolation that we're going through. This is a really incredible time. I'm talking to you from the planet Earth in the month of May in the year 2020. And what we're talking about is largely today some of the ultimate meanings and some of the casual everyday meanings of the virus crisis that we're going through here in 2020 with the so-called coronavirus 19. And that's a technical designation because it narrows down the particular virus that we're talking about. There are a lot of coronaviruses. Okay, moving rapidly along. One of the first things I wanted to bring up was the fact that the media are playing a big role in what we're going through. The media are trying to tie things together, bring people together, and so forth and so on. Well, that's what they tell us, but actually it's the same old money-making game as before, and in my opinion, even worse. From what I can tell, and I brought this up last time, so I'll gloss over this as quickly as I can, but the problem still continues, and that's why I'm mentioning it, that television ads on the major networks, on the so-called news networks, are very disturbingly frequent. I saw the other day that an expert from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, I believe in Los Angeles, California, was talking about the mayor of New York and his somewhat controversial reaction to a relatively large demonstration by a certain group of Jewish people in New York. And Simon Wiesenthal is one of the most famous Nazi hunters in the entire world. He's passed on, but there is a center in his name in LA, and an expert there was talking about the treatment of Jews during this crisis. Now, that's always something relevant. It's always something very important and very heavy and very serious. And so, of course, the time granted to him was squeezed, and he was virtually shoved off the screen in the interview by the woman conducting the interview, who I will say did apologize. And he was squeezed off the screen for a commercial that ended the show. Absolutely amazing that nobody in the control studio could say, look, wait a second. This has ramifications that are very serious. The man is even talking about the Holocaust. That is possibly more important than a commercial. I just thought I'd point that out to people on Jupiter and to people in the year 2097 who might be watching this. It's really atrocious, and I don't know when it's going to change. Now, as a result of that, I think we've covered something very important there. I'm looking at my notes, and on the subject of commercial television, that brings up one thing. The country is still obsessed with money, absolutely obsessed with money, and we don't know what to do with our money in order to take care of this crisis. And let's get to my favorite point about that, the national budget. We still are spending ourselves into a ditch, probably, by overemphasizing military spending. And again, I want to say that so the people on Jupiter realize what this country's about and what this planet's about. It's still shameful that we can't get together somehow as a planet, or at least as a country, and reduce military spending and increase spending on such things as, health, something like that maybe. So again, I just want to emphasize that that is a really important point during the crisis and outside of the crisis, but it's coming to a head here in the crisis. I'm looking once again at my notes. It's just an interesting thing, and this is one of the 2 or 3 more things that I want to mention today in a relatively casually organized presentation. We are seeing a dramatic increase here on planet Earth, increase in clean air. We're seeing a decrease in pollution. Absolutely wonderful. People are starting to breathe again. It's really amazing. There's probably less granite in the air, less this, that, and the other thing. in the air, and people are having much more fun breathing. I've seen pictures of places like India, and this probably applies also to Los Angeles here in America. You can actually see that the air nowadays is much, much cleaner than it was before the crisis. And talking about seeing, I'm removing glasses. The point there is that it would be really great if our leaders could say, you know, there's one nice thing about this virus crisis. We saw that the earth is getting cleaner. And what I'm wondering, in a somewhat maybe magical thinking manner, I don't know, I have no proof of this, is this part of Earth's revenge? There are some people who say, I don't know whether I believe it entirely, but there are some people who talk about the consciousness of the planet Earth. After all, everything is made of consciousness in the regard and the view of many people who are serious thinkers, physicists, for example, that I happen to know of. And I wonder if the Earth is conscious of how much damage we do to it as the inhabitants of the planet. And I wonder if somehow there's a link between the damage done to the Earth and the virus and or the crisis. In a way, it's the Earth screaming at us. Look at it. Look at the Earth, you idiots. The only planet you have to live on. Can't you take better care of it? This time we had to kick you, we the Earth, had to kick you to make you aware of how to clean up the air by everybody going inside. Now, you would think that this could lead to some good thinking. This is my hope, that our grand leaders could get together and say, you know, during the crisis, we could all breathe better. Maybe we should do something to keep the air as clean as it got. Not keep everybody inside, obviously, but at least keep people out of cars that fume and belch and pollute. Maybe somebody will point this out, that there was a good time, e.g. April and May of the year 2020, there was a good time for the Earth. Who knows? Now that's a little bit far out, and here's something else that's really far out. There are two famous films about superheroes that came out in the last 20, 25 years, or maybe further behind than that, further ago than that. Batman, the first Batman, and Superman, the first Superman film. Both of those featured a metropolis, obviously New York, getting very, very polluted due to the special talents of the bad guys concerned. In one film, it was a bad guy, Superman. In the Superman film, the bad guy was Lex Luthor, who was a really likable, very entertaining bad guy. And he unleashed something that got everybody really upset because everybody was getting very sick, or a lot of people were getting very sick in Metropolis, New York City. And in the other film, the Batman film, it got even worse when Jack Nicholson, far less lovable as a bad guy, he played the Joker, and he unleashed big, big health problems in the city also. And I wonder, again, since films and artists are often way ahead of their times, I wonder what the link is there. And I wonder what that had to say. I don't have the answer, I'm just raising the question. The two major films like that would feature bad guys who unleash a horror on the city. And it's a funny fact that this time, with or without Lex Luthor and the Joker, this time around, it seems like the city, New York City, was hit especially hard. You really have to wonder what's behind that. Well, one thing that's behind the entire crisis has been the fact of isolation, which I mentioned just a couple minutes ago. And we have some interesting things that people have brought up about that to raise questions. I wonder, again, will this have perhaps a positive side to it, something beneficial to it? It's driving people indoors. Actually, they've been told to go inside, and they seem to be staying inside, the vast majority of people, most of the time. And I wonder whether there's been an increase in meditation and things like that, and people getting more and more subjective, more and more introverted. I brought up last time that this is a great time for a convinced introvert. Although, as one of those people, the farther you go inside, as one of those people, I think, the farther you go inside, you can also get into some dangerous territory. Here's why. This is an interesting thing, too, I think. In normal times, we talk with each other about all sorts of things. Hi, how's the weather? What do you think of the weather? You don't like it? I don't like it either. So two people walk away thinking it's normal not to like this kind of weather, like the weather we have today. It's very gray and it's been rainy. People in general prefer something sunny. All right, they go outside for a short walk and they agree. Not a real nice day. Both people in that short conversation realize they are not insane. They're not crazy. They're not weird. And normally you have, as the day goes on, zillions of conversations like that, e.g. at the grocery store. And somebody says, well, you owe me $10.99. You don't give that person $2. You give them something bigger than $10.99 or exactly $10.99. You walk out fully aware, even though you're not thinking of it directly, but you're fully aware, you're still a sane person. You can hear the words $10.99 and figure out in your currency how to pay that. You're still sane. You're okay. Boy, I think a lot of us, certainly me, are losing some of that ability to think I'm a sane person in this crisis. I don't want to imply that I'm totally convinced yet that I'm not sane, but I think that in general, the society, the whole society loses its grip a little bit because the individual members of the society are not reassuring each other as the day goes on. You don't hear much about this. There are a lot of people protesting, especially heavily in Michigan and some other states, some of them even armed, rushing to the Capitol building in their state and demanding that the governor let them go back to work, for instance. I really wonder, again, we're raising questions here, is that actually about work or is it just togetherness, plain old togetherness? These people who are protesting are being criticized, and I think rightly, for not social distancing during the protest. But on the other hand, maybe they're uncovering something that's a little bit deeper than what even they are talking about. And again, I'm looking at my notes here because, yeah, there's one complicated thing I sort of forgot. A lot of the people who are protesting are saying, we have a constitutional right not to be locked up. We have the constitutional right to decide our destiny, and that includes the right to assembly. Just want to point out here to the people on Jupiter, you'll hear that a lot if you watch our TV shows and talk to people somehow from Jupiter. And the actual truth is, it's very, very interesting. The right to assembly is not absolute. No right in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights, part of the Constitution, is absolute. Absolutely no right is absolute. Do you have the right to assemble and drive a tank into the Capitol building and then cover that up by saying, well, I was just assembling? No. All sorts of limitations are constitutional on the right to assembly. So when you're watching these protests on TV, do that with something of skepticism, because people are not right who say, I have the right to assemble in any way I feel like it. Some people, as I say, are even armed at these assemblies, and I think that's appalling. Well, one other thing to mention, of course, is baseball versus other sports. We're going without baseball during the crisis. Again, people on Jupiter, baseball is a great game. It's the best game of them all, as sane people realize, and we're going without it. The season should have started early in April or even late March, I think, this year. And there are about 160, I think it's 162 or 164, 162 games in the regular season, I believe. And then there's about a month of championship games after that. We're going without that this year. Or we're going with a truncated season, a shortened season. And I wonder, again, what does that mean? You know, baseball is intrinsic to America. America without baseball, baseball without America, simply impossible. As we all know, George Washington played very good baseball. He was a home run hitter and played center field for the New York Yankees. All of these people, the great Americans, have loved baseball, and we're doing without it. And baseball, you know, is a very circular game. People run around the bases. The outfield wall is part of a circle, and the diamond is inside of a somewhat circular situation. In other words, the diamond actually forms from home plate to third base and from home plate to first base, that's a quarter of a circle. And as I say, the outfield wall is circular, and you run around the bases. And the ball, guess what, is round. And baseball is a very circular game. And instead of having that, we're doing without it. And there's something magical to the idea of a circle, by the way. We can get into that later on. And instead of that, what we're dealing with this year is the hope, and the president even has expressed this, that we will have a football season, college and professional football. Well, a football field is laid out in straight lines. No circles are involved, and it's very linear. And some people would say, me included, that means that it's a relatively left-brained operation, a game of football. And I know I'm wrong physiologically, but we can call it a left-brained operation. It's something that deals with gaining territory. And as the great comedian George Carlin pointed out, it deals with war references to military references. There's the long bomb thrown by the quarterback, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's all sorts of stuff going on there, the vicious tackles and so forth, that's really like a military spectacle. Whereas in baseball, things are a lot softer. People don't deliberately injure each other or even come close to it in a normal baseball situation. So we're going from baseball, which is round and relatively gentle, to football, which is made up of straight lines and is also anything but gentle. And I wonder what that means to the national psyche. It could indicate something important. Who knows? Well, that's it. We've done all sorts of surveys here, raising questions about money and television ads and Batman and Superman and the dangers and opportunities of isolation. And I look forward to seeing you again.